Yesterday, once again, my name appeared, you can see it, next to Mario Conde, Isabel Pantoja, or even in headlines with Paz Vega. What do I have to do with Paz Vega, Isabel Pantoja, or Mario Conde? It doesn't matter. Do you know who will never appear in that headline? Well, for example, Izquierda Unida, which has a debt of 600,000 euros at its headquarters in Madrid, but that's not interesting since now they're government partners.
Well, it's been estimated that it might be more than 4 million because usually the people who are here and request family reunification tend to bring an average of 4 people. That is, if we add an average of 4 people to that million and something, we're talking about more than 4 million people. It could even reach 5.
If not to postpone it, he was asking for time to be able to appear at another time because he claimed that he had a psychological problem. What we know is that he allegedly has depression. He has what would fit a medical diagnosis of depression caused precisely by that fall, by that arrest on December 11th, and by everything that was coming down on him, right?
The social communist system is rotten, and every time there's a tragedy, or even if there isn't one, they invent it, like COVID. When there's a tragedy like the one we're living through in Venezuela, or the ones that have happened over and over in Cuba with cyclones and hurricanes, there are still people who don't have a home from 4 hurricanes ago. And those who get rich are always the ones in power. That's what social communism is.
Look, this whole thing about the law for grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, and all this nonsense and all these lies, this could perfectly be understood as a case of giving up national sovereignty and high treason. Who is the guarantor of national sovereignty? Who in addition has sworn to uphold and enforce the Constitution? All the officials, all of them, starting with the king. He, even though he's not an official as well. That is to say, here we need to get to work, not waste time arguing, but enforce the law. This is a case that can perfectly be understood as a crime of high treason and as opening up national interest to the interference of foreign powers.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon. Thank you for being there, for your loyalty, affection, and effort in promoting this platform for free expression. Thank you. Our numbers grow daily. Today, I will confess something personal to you. I'm not one of those people who talk about their life through YouTube channels. I'm sorry. I think I'm here for other reasons. But there are times when others force me, even if I don't want to. And today is one of those days. Look, a few days ago, Judge Calama asked the tax agency why they hadn't entered the case. In the case of Zapatero, who hadn't paid taxes on the 1 or 2 million worth of jewelry he has in his safe and considered them lost, there are a few 100,000 euros there that he should have paid to the tax agency, and the tax office had no interest. Maybe in the end, and by order of the judge, it will enter the case. Why doesn't the tax office have any interest in collecting its share of Zapatero's jewels? It's very simple. Because they belong to Zapatero. If they belong to Feijo, Diaz Ayuso, or Abascal, they would have entered the case immediately. That's how the tax agency works in Spain. They never investigated Jordi Pujol, or Coldo, or Abalos, let alone Begoña Gomez or Zapatero ever, nor Santos Cerdan, nor Leire Diaz. The tax agency goes after families. And if they're one of their own, well, the file gets passed down, gets lost, or simply gets destroyed. The judge says that a good part of those I've mentioned are an organized mafia, and they are. It's state corruption. And the tax agency, which doesn't belong to the PSOE or to Sanchez, which should belong to everyone, acts as part of that mafia network. Look, almost everything the tax office does is illegal, and this doesn't happen in any other European country. That's why several law firms have reported it, and it's under investigation. Right now, for example, in no other country do they open an inspection and already consider you guilty. and you are the one who has to prove that you are innocent. It's the exact opposite across Europe. It's the tax agency that has to prove the crime, not here. Here, first they accuse you, then they seize your assets, and then if you can, after years, you have to prove that you didn't do it. And why so much press? For laughs, right? Well, because the tax inspector who opens the case gets what they call a productivity bonus, which is nothing more than a commission, a percentage for each inspection they open. Whether they win it or not, it doesn't matter. They get paid just for opening it. That's why they go wholesale. The higher the volume, the better, even if more than half of them end up being worthless. Look, I've been dealing with the tax office for over 15 years. It was during the People's Party years under Montoro when they started coming after me in a completely unfair way. It all started when they decided that I shouldn't be paid as a company by the radio station I worked for, but as an employee. They didn't care that I was paying collaborators water, taxis, and staff expenses. Besides employees, this thing where you can't contribute as a company and only as an employee doesn't happen in any other country in Europe. In Spain, it does. With this trick, they managed to make billions of euros for Rajoy's government. This first inspection forced me to hire lawyers and file reports. They kept denying it. We went to court. I beat the tax agency once, twice, 3 times. Each time I won, they lowered the amount they were asking for. But in the end, on one occasion, I didn't win. The High Court of Justice of Catalonia said no, that the tax agency was right in that case. I had the option to go to the Supreme Court, right? But during this time, in these years, they've seized my house, my car, my salary. Is it free? Do you think it's free to go to the Supreme Court? Who pays the lawyers? I couldn't do it. I didn't have money to pay the lawyers. So because of that circumstance, I had to throw in the towel and look for another way to move forward. During those years, the tax office, while I was still in court with them and they kept winning cases, blackmailed me year after year. They've been doing it for 11 years. As a public figure, they put my face and my name on the tax office's list of defaulters. For 11 years, the last time was yesterday. They publish my debt, my first and last name, and my photo, and they send it to several news agencies so that the journalists most servile to the regime or the uninformed or just the fools, because there are those two, play along and publish the blackmail. Yesterday, once again, my name appeared. You can see it next to Mario Conde, Isabel Pantoja, or even in headlines with Paz Vega. What do I have to do with Paz Vega, Isabel Pantoja, or Mario Conde? It doesn't matter. Do you know who will never appear in that headline? Well, for example, Izquierda Unida, which has a debt of 600,000 euros at its headquarters in Madrid, but that's not interesting since now they're partners in the government. Put Patricia Conde, put Paz Vega, put Bertine Osborne or that party journalist. That way we get rid of them. That's the blackmail I've been enduring for 11 years. In no European country is it allowed to do this kind of harm when the case hasn't been closed, when someone is still litigating in court. In my case, I requested the second chance law and a judge granted it to me. But what does it matter? The tax agency will keep trying to damage my reputation, smear my name, and drag me through the mud, probably because I haven't bowed to their will. If I had money, maybe I would pay or change my political stance, be a thorn in their side where you can imagine they don't like it. I haven't met a single journalist critical of Sanchez, not one who hasn't been audited by the tax agency. Ask them all. Look, in these 15 years of fighting against the tax agency's blackmail, they took my house, my car, my salary. When they finished with me, they went after or tried to go after my children, my wife. They didn't give up. They persisted in their efforts. Today I live in a rented place. I have enough to get by, and I know they have very little left, very little to keep destroying as many fundamental rights as they have been doing for almost 20 years. The tax office has become public enemy number one in Spain. For any self-employed person, any entrepreneur, any shopkeeper or salaried worker who earns too much, and especially anyone who criticizes the Sanchez movement. This is the blackmail practiced by the tax agency, an enforcement arm of the current government, to go after enemies and never investigate one of their own. Gentlemen, I'm not going to stop. You'll have me in front of you, yes, until the end of my days. Keep publishing my name, my photo, saying that I'm a debtor, do whatever you want. The truth only has one path, and it certainly doesn't go through the tax agency. Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon. Ladies and gentlemen, the regularization is over. At least the deadline ended on June 30th, and 1,300,000 people have requested to regularize their status in Spain. And the police estimate that at least 500,000 of those who tried or are trying to regularize their status came from other countries. It's the pull effect. They haven't been here for months or years trying to find a job, but rather they come from France, the United Kingdom, Germany, because it's so easy to get papers in Spain and so difficult in other countries. Don't just focus on the figure of 1,300,000, because if everyone is regularized, this number goes up because of family reunification. The ones who really hit the nail on the head were the police unions. While the government was talking about a figure of 500,000 or 600,000, they had already warned that this would be multiplied by 3. There's the spokesperson for UPOL, my friend Laura Garcia. How are you, Laura?
Dear Albert, hello, it's always a pleasure. Well,
you've got it right once again. If they regularize 1,300,000, how many will actually come here with papers? Will they be legal in months or in just a few years?
Well, it's been estimated that it might be more than 4 million, because usually when people are here and request family reunification, an average of 4 people tend to come. That is, if we add an average of 4 to that a little over 1 million people, we're talking about more than 4 million people. It could even reach 5.
But this changes everything. This changes the price of housing, rent, salaries, public assistance in a country, which without a doubt, if they're here, they have the right to certain things. I mean, this changes everything. It's a number that no one had prepared us for, right?
No one. In fact, no one was consulted about this. Remember that this was done behind closed doors, and we found out about it at a Podemos rally. The rest of the parliamentary groups were not consulted, the national police were not consulted, and we are the ones in charge. It's solely the responsibility of the National Police's Immigration and Borders Unit. It's also a sensitive issue. And absolutely no one was consulted. That's why we've seen such a disaster from the very beginning. Well, with the endless number of people who had to sleep on the street, massive fraud, mafias rubbing their hands together, all because it was done completely improvised, without consulting the professionals who had warned about what would happen. As I always say, Albert, we're not fortune tellers, but we are police officers.
No, you're not on the street. You know what's going on. For example, there are mafias for everything, to get papers, to get vulnerability status, to bring them to Spain. This mass regularization has made several European mafias rich, hasn't it?
Yes, there has been everything. And it's true that, well, everything was very lax. All the requirements they asked for were very easy to falsify. Of course, here the mafias know it and take advantage of those people's needs, even of those who weren't even in Spain. There were intelligence reports that alerted Spain that there was a massive movement, a massive flow of immigrants heading here. Once news of the meeting broke, people came from the United Kingdom, France, and Italy. We have seen how Immigration and Borders The general police station warned that there was, well, a 60% increase in false reports of lost passports. Coincidentally, from Pakistanis, Algerians, Moroccans, Colombians, and what they wanted was to use the national police itself, the institution, to commit fraud. Because what they reported was that, well, they had lost it here in Spain a year and a half ago. And so, in a completely fraudulent way, tried to justify that they were in Spain. The Mafia sold all types of documents, since absolutely anything worked here. That you were taking any course, a trip, anything, absolutely everything.
It's tremendous. Since January 2026, the National Police detected an increase, mind you, of 866% in Pakistanis, 356 more Algerians, and 114 more Moroccans. If any of them come, they go to your police station and say, I've been here for a year or two because you had to be here for more than a year, a certain number of months to regularize your status, and I lost my passport. You simply make a new one for them and that's it. No one can check how long they've been here. They might have just crossed the border illegally.
Yes, it's not just about making a new one for them. It's that with that report, these people were using it to justify during this regularization process that they were here. In other words, they were using an official document from the National Police for that justification. Just like someone else would submit their registration or any other type of documentation, they were submitting a report. Of course, this is where all the alarms went off, because as you said, those percentages skyrocketed, and it was detected that the mafias were encouraging these people to pull this scam, just like there have been so many others, of course.
Now that 1,300,000, which could be 4 or 5 million, now they have a deadline, they say, to see who is eligible, who stays, and who doesn't. But the reality is that this deadline is very difficult to investigate and analyze. There isn't enough staff, nor the will, nor any way to do it with such a massive number of people. And they tell us that without waiting for the decision from the Supreme Court or the European High Court, they want to speed up the regularization, giving them a provisional residence and work permit. We're basically saying that these people are already staying, right? Because if they start here with authorization, it's really hard to tell them to leave later.
Of course, they're improvising everything. And hey, in such a sensitive matter like this, look, they're planning to do a fast-track regularization because the deadline is 3 months, that is July, August, and September, to prove all of that. At first, we were already in a tough spot because there weren't enough resources to do it. With 500,000 people, imagine with more than 1 million. And in those 3 months, it's going to be absolutely impossible. And then after those 3 months, they do have a month to go to the police stations to receive those TIRs, the foreigner identification cards. It's just that it's going to collapse everywhere, because also the situation will arise when it coincides with the deadline for, well, the expiration of another 500,000 cards that have to be renewed at the police stations, which are expiring right now. That is, we would have to add another 500,000.
It's crazy. There are many reasons for this rush. I have mine. I don't know yours. On May 23rd, there are municipal elections and they want these new millions to vote. And who are they going to vote for if not for the one who allowed me to be legal in Spain? I see it as pure electoral interest. How do you see it, the police?
Well, for us, logically, what matters to us is security. The fact that so many people are being regularized with such lax measures, besides being able to access public services and vote in local elections, for us it's about security. The fact that police records have been omitted is extremely serious, because people who are criminals will be regularized no matter what, just because their criminal records haven't arrived yet. There is no final judgment. And when those records do arrive, those people will already be regularized. That is to say, it's a completely unfair measure that puts the rest of the citizens in danger. And above all, criminals are taking the place of decent people, of immigrants who are decent, of course.
And who obey the law. Well, we already saw it when the government under Marlaska sent a circular to the prisons asking, please, for those who were in prison to be regularized. Foreigners without papers but without a final sentence because they could be regularized. So there is an interest in legalizing the criminal. Is this hard to understand, Laura?
Yes, especially because it's extremely dangerous. Those people who are in pretrial detention, we know that approximately 80% end up with a final sentence. That is to say, a person who is in prison while waiting for that final sentence is certainly there for very serious crimes committed here in Spain. And there are people who are currently roaming free, who have more than 100 police records and still haven't received those final sentences. Because the way justice works is slower than this massive regularization. And when it finally happens, well, they'll already be regularized without a doubt, Alberto.
Did you see Marlaska at the Senate committee, your boss?
Yes, I watched for 3 hours and 15 minutes. Not at all, since he didn't say anything. No, of course not.
When has Marlaska ever said anything? In fact, he's given as many versions about Lere and the director of the Civil Guard as Abalos did about Delcy at the airport. He's already up to 15 or 20. What a shame. I think you have to endure the worst minister of the interior in our democratic history. And he's still hanging on. Why doesn't he leave? What's going on? What is it that keeps him from leaving, right?
Of course, he's also been the most disapproved minister. He's the worst. He's the worst. Yesterday, we saw him. Well, let's remember that he denied over and over again those meetings with Lera, and he had no choice but to backtrack and admit the truth. But once the UCO reports were made public, if not, we would have been left with that version, which was obviously false. The most important thing is still unknown, just like when she was the general director to the Senate, which is the content and motivation of those conversations, of those meetings, we still don't know. Look, we don't care if she had coffee, if she had tea, if it was in a cafe, if it was in an office, if it was in a house or in a car. But the thing is, we still don't know why they met. And yesterday, Marlaska wasn't defending the national police. He wasn't defending the civil guard. He was defending political leaders, leaders from the PSOE, because here's supposedly the Lera plot. The Fontanera plot is the PSOE's plot. And the Director General of the Civil Guard, just like the Director General of the National Police, are political positions also chosen and appointed by him. I can assure you, Albert, that if those positions were held by national police officers or civil guards who had earned those positions on merit, and if they had met with the plumber when everything was already known, they would have been immediately dismissed and removed from their positions. But of course, they are protected, defending their own, defending the PSOE.
What they've done with the national police is unbelievable. Well, just like we've seen the UCO enter the General Directorate of the Civil Guard, I hope to see the UDEF enter the Ministry of the Interior. You and I will see it. That day I'll call you and we'll talk about it. Does that sound good to you?
Yes, but look, Albert, the General Director of the National Police, the current Francisco Pardo Viqueras, used to meet with Coldo, and the main advisor to the General Director kept meeting even after Coldo had been arrested. What sense does that make? And he wasn't dismissed either. It's just that nothing here makes any sense to us.
Well, these are very difficult times when democracy is at stake, when dictatorship is already here. And we absolutely have to support the UDEF, which is doing a brilliant job. It was shut down, silenced, tied hand and foot, but finally they have been freed and now they only obey the orders of an independent judge. Congratulate them for me. A big hug.
Count on it, a hug.
Thank you. Laura Garcia, Jupol spokesperson, Castillon Jupol.
Castillon Confidencial.
From Albert Castillon.
We're waiting for you at the home of sparkling water, Vichy Catalan.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to focus on the grandchildren law, just as we were talking with the Jupol spokesperson about the mass regularization, the grandchildren law that we have denounced here all alone for years. First, Vox got its act together. It has to be said, the first party that understood the message, and now the PP as well, though not very convincingly. They don't talk about electoral fraud. They talk about interference, electoral engineering to change the census. Well, okay, fine. Electoral engineering, how hard it is for them to call things what they are. But that mass naturalization happens in Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, or Cuba. In Cuba, it has set off alarm bells. The United States has found that criminals, drug traffickers, and people who collaborate with the Castro regime are being naturalized. And until now, they were under control because they had Cuban nationality. But if they now have a Spanish passport, who controls them? Zoe Valdez from Miami, my dear writer and activist, how are you?
Thanks again for inviting me, Albert. You know I care about you a lot too.
This is your home, and we are proud to have you on the team. Hey, I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could give last names, and show photos of the drug traffickers, criminals, and Castro supporters who are going to get the Spanish passport. Is it as dangerous as the United States says?
Yes, it is that dangerous. Look, there is an institution here in Miami and also located in other places that is doing the work of reporting people by name and surname. Of those who are in the United States, they are also in Spain. You know, having come out of communism, I've told you before, I don't give out lists because I don't belong to any of those institutions with the power to do that. That would be a bit like doing what the communists do, right? And I've never liked that. But yes, the names are there, the names exist, and that's terrible. That was to be expected. Remember that also during Mariel in 1980, the boats that went to pick up the dissidents, so many people from the Cuban people who wanted to come to the United States, Fidel Castro took advantage and filled the boats with convicts, common prisoners, criminals, murderers, and people taken out of mental institutions. That is mentally ill people whom they put on the boats and dropped off in Miami in the United States. And that was a huge problem. Afterwards, what they did was generalize and say that everyone on those boats were criminals and people of very low character. Not to mention that there were also engineers, doctors, writers like Reinaldo Arenas, for example, Juan Abreu, for example, and not telling the truth, which is what they always do. They're masters at that. But the names are there, the names exist, and that's what will fill it. Look, what you just said, you've been denouncing it, I know, because I've been here on these shows with you denouncing it, but a journalist who hasn't, I can't say her name either because she's in Cuba, and during the last elections, we did some work, me from Paris and her from Cuba, and she was giving me details step by step about the buses, about the associations from the Canary Islands, about the associations that are in Cuba, Spanish ones, of course, all social communists that go to find people. They do everything for them. First, they handle all the paperwork. They give them nationality just so they can go vote. So when they vote, they give them a little box of rice with chicken or whatever they have. I mean, a vote in exchange for a few hours with a full stomach, and then they send them home. What happens then? Since there are other procedures that need to be done within Cuba in order to travel to Spain, those procedures are only done for the people the regime favors, not for everyone. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course, of course.
That's it. That's the crux of the matter. That's how they've won. The thing is the point, because they've made it up. One gives this and the other prevents this. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of the 300,000 Cubans who have now applied for expedited naturalization, how many of them will be the kind we're talking about? Castro supporters, drug traffickers, criminals at the service of the regime, and now more.
And there will be more. But look, anyway, the people who come from Cuba, except in Miami, which is a city that gets you up to speed on what you have to do, because if you don't, you'll die. For people who come from Cuba to Europe, it's harder for them, despite all the help, to really start working for the society that has received them, of course. Because if you start giving them, like that woman who was with the PSOE, who after being in what were the institutions, those who gave money to Cuba, like Lere Pagin, like she did with Cuba, who gave tons, millions to Cuba, who start giving aid to all those people who arrive, those people are never going to work inside the country, never. That's why in France, the Cubans who arrive in France immediately go to Spain because they can't stand it in France. In France, there is no aid for Cubans, and in France, there is no political asylum for Cubans. Rarely is political asylum given to a Cuban in France.
I met Lere Pagin at the European Commission, in the European Parliament, in Brussels. She's still there, firmly established and very happy. Let me greet another brilliant intellectual in this country and a good friend, expert psychologist, my dear Julio Bronchal. How are you, my friend?
Hello, Alberto. Hello, Zoe. These introductions are overwhelming and leave me a bit bewildered, as I don't feel I deserve them.
We're off to a bad start.
Don't exaggerate very well. I'm very happy to be here with you and with our distinguished audience.
Well, the grandchildren law, this massive naturalization without checking criminal records. It doesn't matter if you give a passport to someone who will never set foot in Spain because they're going to have it anyway. And with the right to retirement, a pension, benefits, and to vote. It's very hard for future generations to understand that Spain did this and that it was legal. I don't understand it. It's very complicated. It's hard to explain to anyone.
Well, you simply have to explain it by saying that it's a criminal maneuver by this government to dilute national sovereignty. It's a way to devalue the vote of Spaniards who live in Spain, which is what they're ultimately after, who are the real Spaniards, right? It's a criminal maneuver by Spanish social communism to stay in power. Nothing more than that. Everything else is a lie. So it has to be said that clearly. It's a maneuver to steal sovereignty from us Spaniards. What sense does it make for a citizen who doesn't contribute, doesn't pay taxes, and knows nothing about what's happening in this country to make decisions about what will happen here? How can it be that the vote of my son, your son, or a person who lives here, works here, and experiences the problems of this country, someone who chooses their politicians hoping they'll solve their problems, has the same value as someone else's? Specifically, that power and authority is given to people we don't know, and it's also just as true that they know nothing about what's happening in this country, right? In other words, it's a huge lie, a fraud, a way to rob us and silence us. It's a covert coup, a criminal maneuver. It must be said clearly, you were there and people were listening to your interesting conversation with Zoe. And there's a part of this that's about taking advantage of this loophole so that criminal groups can get in, intelligence services keep infiltrating here to keep meddling with Spanish politics. You name it. But in the end, what they're really trying to do is nothing more than destroy Spanish democracy, completely devaluing the meaning and value of the vote. Because it's not just that these people are going to vote, but it's the perfect excuse to introduce hundreds of thousands of votes that we'll never know if they're real, belong to real physical people, even assuming they really correspond to those supposed grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or great-great-grandchildren. It's truly absurd, and this should not be tolerated. I mean, I insist, we can't just sit back or resign ourselves to having our right to vote stolen from us.
What's worse, we've heard PSOE rallies given to Spanish consuls, for example, in Argentina, to the PSOE in Buenos Aires, calling their people together to instruct them on how to vote, which province you should cast your vote in, because you can put it in whichever province you want. And they want us to put it in the provinces where it's easier with just a handful of votes to flip things from PSOE to PP. Look, for example, at what the PSOE of Argentina has posted on social media. They're not even hiding it. It says, if you need guidance to complete citizenship procedures, bilateral agreements, social security, or consular matters, at our office, they will advise you for free, no appointment needed. On Thursday's General Perón Street, I don't know what. In other words, they're telling you directly, I'll do everything for you, I'll get you citizenship, and that's it. I'll add you to the census. At the very moment they become nationalized, they register in the census with the help of a member of the PSOE, in this case from Buenos Aires, and they fill in the box for them. Let's see, Alberto, the places you were telling me.
It's a whole organized fraud aimed at what we're talking about, at stealing our ability to decide and manipulating a vote. strange, foreign, irrelevant in the broad sense of the word. And to make it easier to understand, let's use an analogy with a community of neighbors, an apartment building. What sense would it make if, to make decisions about the elevator, the stairs, the payment for maintenance, or the services of that community, we gave the right to vote to people who lived there 50 or 100 years ago, or to the descendants of someone who once lived in that building and who now live in another city or another country or wherever. In the end, it's about introducing, stealing, let's say it clearly. They are stealing our vote, our right to vote, our right to decide. And this can't be allowed to continue. I insist once again, we have to go all out now. The army, if it fulfills its mission to defend national sovereignty, should already start to intervene. We cannot tolerate having our right to decide about our future and the future of our children blatantly stolen from us with lies.
So far, several groups and parties have reported the case to the Supreme Court or the European Court of Justice. I'm afraid that from here that they will temporarily halt the whole thing, Zoe. I don't have much faith. And we mentioned here that in 2007, Hugo Chavez did the same thing to stay in power. He legalized 300,000 Colombians. Was something similar done in Cuba?
In Cuba, it hasn't been done except with, well, it has been done with Venezuelans, of course, but also with the Chinese. I mean, there is a proportion of Chinese people who have been given dual citizenship. I imagine, because there isn't much information about it, I imagine it's those who have bought the forest, those who have bought, because they've bought almost all of Cuba. All of Cuba's natural resources have been bought by the Chinese.
That's incredible. Please, I want you to listen because there was talk.
They mentioned 1 million, but I doubt there are that many.
Yeah. Listen to Elisa, Juan, Guerrero, JM, Sofia, and Sixto. They're confidential sources on this fraudulent wax vote, this grandchildren law.
All laws must include a report that details the costs. Has anyone seen the expense this is going to cost us in Social Security, both in assistance and pensions, or is the PSOE going to pay for it?
I don't think the idea you proposed about canceling the Serra vote is a bad one. In fact, it's a trick. Have they rigged elections before? In these same elections we've had in Andalusia, Castilla-La Mancha, Castilla y León, Extremadura, did the PSOE win with the Serra vote?
The PP doesn't say anything about the fraudulent votes that the PSOE is organizing with the votes from foreigners, from residents or Spaniards, from grandchildren abroad, and the manipulation happening in the mail. And only Vox has come out to talk about this issue, and the others haven't said anything. I agree with banning foreign voting.
Everything. If you don't pay contributions in Spain, you don't vote in Spain.
I'm Spanish and a resident in Italy, and I vote as an overseas resident. I'd rather lose my right to vote as a Spaniard abroad than have Pedro Sanchez manipulate my vote.
Now it turns out that everything they're going to bring in from abroad, that thing about adding them to the ballot boxes here, just like that, well, I don't think so. Let's see who those gentlemen or ladies are and where they come from.
What Sofia and other listeners said was the proposal made by Vox. And they said, Julio, that, and besides, it's complicated, isn't it? That it's probably not legal to eliminate all voting options for Spaniards abroad. I mean, extra voting. Because this tyrant Sanchez has manipulated the process for us. How do you see it?
Well, I think it's fine. I think it's fine because in the end, in an emergency situation like this, you have to go with the lesser evil. Compared to what could be a fraudulent massive vote and a complete theft of what an election is supposed to mean, it's preferable to have a percentage until things are clarified and until all the guarantees of vote traceability and so on are provided so that this supposed right remains, that it somehow remains suspended. I think it's a matter of national emergency. We're risking something fundamental, which is national sovereignty. One of the insider outlets rightly said that every law should be accompanied by an economic report. All right, very well, but that's the least of it. The fundamental thing is that they're silencing you. They're stealing your country. We're about to consolidate a dictatorship here, a tyrant, a criminal, who with all these tricks is going to stay in power. And no, we can't tolerate it. The fact that a few thousand Spaniards don't have that right in these elections, well, compared to what's at stake, it seems like a lesser evil to me.
Do you agree, Zoe?
Yes, I absolutely agree. Look, I need to clarify something. In Cuba, it can't be the same because in Cuba, elections have always been a farce. I mean, in Cuba, even if they naturalize them or not, Fidel Castro and his people always win 99% because there isn't a single opposition party. There's no way they can participate in the elections. The opposition exists, there are parties and movements, but they're not allowed. The only one is, as Federica Mogherini said, that Italian woman who was in the European Parliament, who I think is now on trial. And that's because she stole like crazy during COVID. She said that Cuba was a single party democracy. Can you imagine? And that's what the European Union says. It's just unbelievable. But that's what he's after. That's the model Pedro Sanchez is pursuing. And what's going on? When a lot of people arrive already naturalized, already prepared for that single party democracy, the PP leaves. Because we're already seeing what the PP is doing. And the PP is going to disappear just like the Republicans disappeared in France. And only Vox will remain for now, which isn't the only thing they're denouncing, but they're going to do terrible things to Vox. They're already doing it. And the people who say the right needs to unite are the ones doing it to them. Because you want them to join the PP but not Vox. Is that what you want? Well, no, because that's not what's going to happen.
Speaking of what they're doing to Vox, there are things happening here that we should never normalize. Because the day we do, that's it. We're done. I want you to see a photograph. This is in Seville. There was an LGTBI march and they were walking around with one of those silver waiter trays and Santiago Abascal's head on top of the tray. I'm sure that the association that organized the march received subsidies. It received them. Subvenciones públicas. And also that no one has reported this as a hate crime, and I find it hard to understand. Did you see the photo, Zoe?
I saw it. Look, those marches don't make any sense anymore. Those marches shouldn't exist anymore. Because those marches were indeed about claiming rights. I supported them. I was in those marches when, in fact, the head they put on that platter wasn't Abascal's, it was the gays. To say it clearly, that's how it was in Cuba. That in Cuba, yes, and also in other places where they are, and it keeps happening. And that they are supporting people like Hamas, all of them in Gaza, all of that. It was to defend homosexuals from what was happening. Now it turns out that homosexuals, supposedly persecuted, supposedly in a march that is against that persecution, what they do is display the head of a democratic leader on a platter, a leader who was democratically elected, a political leader who is very popular among Spaniards and who is going to become even more and more popular. Well, but that's it. What's happening is not only in France. Look at what happened in the soccer match where the Moroccan player, I think he is, made the gesture, that gesture that's so typical of them of turning around. It's not just happening in France, a Moroccan player that Western societies must stop allowing. No, you can't keep making that gesture. These kinds of things are happening. Yes, but here there was a soccer match where I think he made the gesture.
What is that?
That strategy of objectifying the other, they have no right to exist. And once someone is a thing, they can be subjected to any kind of ridicule, abuse, or cruelty. And besides, there's no need to justify it. Besides, it's done with pride. It's a badge of honor to commit these atrocities, to carry the severed head of whoever it may be, right? In the way that's only happening in France. Which we should also understand that maybe at the moment of martyrdom, soccer, we're honor Moroccan player, which is like very biblical, right? But the issue of the left and homosexuality is really paradoxical because Zoe Valdez will surely be able to explain more knowledgeably what I'm about to say here, which many people don't know. In these LGTBI pride marches, seeing the soccer game and Moroccans feels like lighting a candle to both God and the devil. The gesture is contradictory. happening only in France. That in soccer, where a player stood out for a cruelty without limit or measure against homosexuals. Yes, Che Guevara showed boundless cruelty toward homosexuals, so we will remember this gesture. What is happening is not in Havana, just a few years after the revolution, where he talked about soccer, the player, he talked about those hairdressers, that's what he called them. I think they were the perverts, the gesture.
Pervertidos, pervertidos.
They said he gave them the name of hairdressers, making an analogy between hairdressers and homosexuals. Che Guevara founded what they called the military units to aid production, which were concentration camps to re-educate homosexuals. In fact, at the entrance of these camps, there was a slogan that said, "Work will make you men," similar to the Nazi Arbeit macht frei, which meant work makes you free. That is to say, the left-wing fool. The progressive planner is so ignorant that he has no idea where he is. And invoking the very executioners of what he is supposedly defending, it's a movement where everything is corrupted, and if not, it's the result of barbarism and absolute ignorance. Not to mention, because history is there, how the Cuban regime under Che Guevara did an international tour to see how other revolutions were. They had faced the problem of homosexuality, because it was a remnant of bourgeois society. They went to China to ask what had been done, and the Chinese explained they had gathered them. They trapped them all near a river and beat them to death, then threw them into the river so that when the bodies floated down through the city, people would know what awaited anyone who declared themselves homosexual. And now it turns out that the left is the standard bearer for homosexual rights. It's all an immense lie, and standing up to that means facing a fanatical army of illiterates. Is it really true that the left today is barbaric?
Zoe, do you agree with everything he says? For example, I was thinking about the Palestinian flags, that that the one who has lost and that the left has lost, that the left is the one that has lost the most, and that the left is the one. Besides, it's a business of about 30,000 euros on average per float, and there are 50 floats, so you can do the math. The numbers of 1.5 million don't come down from that contradiction of invoking justice. The countries that treat them the worst, what is the reason for that, Zoe?
Well, what Julio just said is that they are ignoramuses. They are people who have no idea, people who don't even know what it is. A Palestinian flag, to begin with, Palestine doesn't exist. Let's start there. Palestine doesn't exist. They themselves didn't want it to exist. They themselves didn't want it to exist when they were given the opportunity twice. So they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't even know what flag they're carrying. And besides that, if they did know, it would be even worse. Because there are many of them who know that in Fene, homosexuals are thrown off balconies, they're thrown from rooftops, they're hanged, they're subjected to horrors, their lives are taken from them. I mean, they have to know that because that's in all the videos, which they themselves, the same ones, this type of Islam share. They put them everywhere. They themselves share those videos. They record them. They share them. So if you ignore it, it's because there's something going on. There's a business there. There's money involved. I always go back to the money part.
Do you remember the so-called Miracle Flotilla, right? The narco-sexual cruise, the one that was going to liberate the Gaza Strip and all that paraphernalia, including their Barbie and everything else. When they approached the coast and the territorial waters of what they thought was the Gaza Strip, they hid all their colorful little flags. The girls who, were dressed as you would expect on a cruise like that, wearing bikinis and so on, put on their clothes and burqas and everything. I mean, excuse my language, they're a damn meme. I mean, it's all a lie. That's it. Those images are out there and circulating because it's further evidence of the huge fraud and the huge lie. The audience needs to know something to understand this maze. Socialism is always a lie. Everything is a lie. It's that simple. Earlier, we talked about the progressive planism, the social planism, the Pedro planism, which is one of the most toxic branches. Progressive planism also has its commandments. The first is to justify Pedro, no matter the evidence, obviously, and then there are many others. and it's that you will never tell the truth because everything in socialism is always fraud and lies.
Gentlemen, let's go to Venezuela because people have woken up there. They already did it by removing Maduro, by extracting him, United States, US. But now with the earthquake, they have said this is as far as we go. Images that you confidentially send me from Venezuela. When they catch a police officer stealing, they corner him and take the money from him to tear it up in front of him.
And don't get involved in my life. Come on, come on.
And there's no evidence because it's broken. Look, here it is. We broke it. And now there's no evidence. Why is there no evidence? Now, why is there no evidence? Look, tell me. He's applying that because it's a car. Why don't you tell me?
All women, this is all women. Cornering a male police officer, the weapon they use, the phone, immediately uploading the image to social media. You don't know how much it embarrasses them, how much it stigmatizes them afterward. And we show what they are, thieves, right? This attitude is magnificent. People in Venezuela have lost their fear, right?
Has fear faded with what's happening in Venezuela? I'm sick over it because it's been a while. It's terrible what's happening. These people have no soul. These people have none. Look how they've shut it down. They closed the entrance to La Guaira so that aid couldn't get in. Aid that, who knows what they're going to do with it, because in Cuba, we already know that every time there's a hurricane, that aid is later sold in the hard currency stores in all of them, and they make money from it and don't give it to the people. It's criminal. There's no other word for it. It's criminal, very criminal, and there's no forgiveness for those people. I don't see how they can keep going in power. I don't see how they can stay in power.
I hope not. But not only that, Diosdado closed downtown La Guaira to prevent aid from coming in and to make things harder for the people, which he's done his whole life. They assure me that they were taking out gold bars, large amounts of cash from funds, basements that had been left flooded. In other words, it was used to get drugs out of the place. They know exactly where all of that was in the destroyed places, and they wanted to get their stuff out first, then the human beings. If there's time, otherwise no. They're capable of that and much more. Look at what they're capable of. From Venezuela, they sent me this photo of an overturned truck. This truck had an accident, it overturned on the road, and it's full of humanitarian aid. All right. The local institutions are asking for $4,000 to lift it, for the tow truck to go and remove the truck so the aid can arrive. $4,000. The truck has been there for 3 days. Or this image, this one is from before the earthquake, but it's striking and it shows what the country is like. A container, one of those giant containers that ships use to cross the Atlantic, falls into the sea. The door opens a little and bills and stacks and more dollar bills start coming out. The fishermen and people who were there grab barges and start collecting whatever they can.
Wow! Pass me that bundle, that's mine. I'm going to sleep with all this cash. This is a blessing from heaven, you hear?
But the old cash was inside there.
Quick!
We're rich, they say, we're rich. This happened at least in February or March. Before it happened, this only happens in Venezuela, well, and in Cuba, right? In places like that, where dirty money is everywhere in millions of bills, a result of drug trafficking. This Zoe is only produced by drug traffickers, right?
Well, it happened with COVID all over the world when the PSCH did everything they did so people could steal hand over fist the way they have. It's just that it's a system, like Julio says, the social communist system is rotten, and every time there's a tragedy, or even if there isn't one, they invent it, like COVID. When there's a tragedy like the one we're living through in Venezuela, or the ones that have happened over and over in Cuba with cyclones and hurricanes, there are still people who don't have a home from as far back as 4 hurricanes ago. And those are the ones who get rich, the ones who are always in power. That's what social communism is. That's what Julio said.
By the way, Zoe Valdez just published an article in the debate titled Venezuela Mon Amour, which really touched my heart. She says Caracas is a nocturnal creature, a wounded beast that remakes itself every dawn. But that night, while the earth kept breathing deeply, the city seemed to whisper to them, I will not fall, I will not give up. I will not go out. You write so well, Zoe, and what emotion you're conveying to the people who are in Venezuela with their hearts in their throats. There are still people alive. They send me images showing that they're still trying and looking for someone alive because there are still people alive. There have been earthquakes where people were found alive 10, 15, even 20 days later under the rubble. We have to keep that hope alive. Yesterday, Nito Perez Osuna, the Venezuelan journalist, told me that this earthquake takes Diosdado and Delcy. Listen.
The earthquakes brought down Delcy. They brought down Delcy, they brought down Jorge, and they brought down Diosdado. This is a matter of weeks. People don't believe them anymore. Wherever they go, people boo them. Nobody wants to take pictures with them. Nobody pays attention to them. Nobody obeys them. What he has left is his little group, which is getting smaller and smaller. And I don't know if you've seen the most recent images. People already want to lynch the police officers who break into houses to steal. Patrol Medellin.
Is that so? Do you think the earthquake will wipe them out, Julio, that Chavismo is over?
God willing, anyway, this evil kind has a certain ability to take advantage of catastrophes and thrive within them. Following up on what we were discussing earlier, what were you saying? That within these corruptions, these corrupt regimes, like the one in Cuba, like the one in Venezuela, the one in Nicaragua, these catastrophes suddenly surface, containers full of bills. Obviously, it's not from Venezuela's ruined productive capacity, nor Cuba's another devastated country. It comes from drug trafficking, but you don't have to look that far. That is, look at how socialism operates everywhere. Because taking advantage of a tragedy, which someday we'll know where it came from, which was COVID, what Spanish socialism did, which is a branch of this whole international of crime, the Puebla group and so on, was it to shut down parliament, to steal as much as possible using masks and PCR tests? And what did they do during the Valencia flood? What did they do? Exactly the same thing. Trying to take advantage of the suffering and horror of what happened in my homeland to gain political ground. That is to say, you have to be very careful because, as always, they have an advantage over regular people. Because a regular person, and we're talking about the average man, which is a concept used in law, has certain moral limits. These people don't have them and never have. That's why they always catch you by surprise. Taking advantage of a situation like this, they're capable of doing things no one would understand. For example, taking advantage of mass suffering to steal left and right, which is what they did here in Spain. So I understand what she's saying. I don't remember her name. I don't know if she's a journalist or
a good person.
I think what she said doesn't add anything new. The Venezuelan people despise and abhor all these people. The fact that they ignore them, that they boo them, is nothing new. I think we need to stay very cautious.
Let's not let our guard down. About Sanchez, I want to hear from Jose Angel Carlos Carin from London and Fernando.
After seeing the last socialist meeting, I've stopped thinking that they're a corrupt party. These are simply a cult. There are many cults that try to cover themselves up more than these people.
And if in 2027 this guy doesn't call elections, if he doesn't, who can force him? The king?
No.
All I hear is talk about the Constitution, that if nothing is written or if it doesn't allow it, to kick the scoundrel out of Moncloa. I'm sure there has to be some loophole in the law to kick Pedro Sanchez out.
Is it really possible that this can't be stopped, that we see we're heading straight for a Venezuela? And on top of that, the Venezuelans who have seen this happen sign up for a pittance to the mess they're going to drag us into in Spain.
Do I have any advice? Because we're a bit disappointed. This guy keeps manipulating the census. Now he's going on vacation for 5 weeks, and we were afraid he might run away. Well, I mean, hopefully he leaves Spain and we never see him again. Any advice? Legally, when it seems like there's nothing we can do, what should we do?
The question is open. Well, I'll take the floor. Well, I understand that in the end, when things get that tense, you have to go where the real power is, which is in force. They can't keep deceiving us, confusing us. Look, this whole thing about the law for grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all these lies and nonsense, this could perfectly well be understood as a case of surrendering national sovereignty and high treason, because it's allowing foreign powers to meddle in national politics. Yes.
But do you know who should say that? Candido Conde Pumpido, President of the Constitutional Court. No, he won't do it.
He's not going to say it. No, this should be clearly understood as a threat to national sovereignty. Who is the guarantor of national sovereignty? Who else has sworn to uphold and enforce the Constitution? All public officials, all of them starting with the king. He too, even though he's not a public official. That is to say, here we need to get to work, not waste time arguing, but enforce the law. This is a case that can perfectly well be understood as the crime of high treason and as opening up national interests to the interference of foreign powers. There is an institution that the people, the nation, have entrusted with the defense of national sovereignty. And as Colonel Vandala said the other day, maybe they should show up at an office and say, this is as far as you go, because now it's my turn to get to work. In other words, you are compromising. My role is to defend national sovereignty and to defend the Spanish nation, and you are harming it. Let the courts judge what has been done, and for now recover national sovereignty. Listen, a board is convened, elections are called, but clean ones supervised, not only by international observers, but also by prestigious national entities. And let's see what happens, and we get rid of this filth. We just can't keep playing the game they want us to play.
Yes, but every time I talk to people from the army, they tell me they're there to take orders. Even if they're against the Constitution, it's very difficult. Now, the ones who obey get promoted to general. Those who don't, like Perez de los Cobos, get kicked out of the force, right? Zoe, any suggestions, please? You've been through this. You've already experienced this.
Well, and I'm still experiencing it. The thing is, as you said, or as you all just said, there are many suggestions. But when one doesn't work, the other doesn't work either, because these people are experts at staying in power. He's not going to step down. I can guarantee you that he from power. Look, the other day, with the whole Congress against him, the vote against him, he was clapping, applauding himself as if no one had voted against him. It's just that it's something of great psychopathy. Julio must know much more about that. This guy is a psychopath. This guy is not going to leave power. He's not going to leave. And the only option, in my opinion, is for Spain to be out in the streets all the time, not to abandon the streets. For now, and then the option that Vox is taking, which is filing lawsuits, it's just that the only one filing lawsuits is Vox. And then they say that it's Vox. I mean, then they say it's others, even for the same press. No.
This is very curious, and I wanted to say it because, look, on television, on all of them, both private and public, in Spain, a lot of people who are part of the popular prosecution against these cases regularly appear. Begoña Gomez, the brother, the grandchildren's law, everyone shows up except Vox. There has been some kind of message, I don't know if written or verbal, saying that Vox's popular prosecution shouldn't be invited to any media outlet. Even Haste Oír, even Justicia Europa shows up, but never Vox. Someone is very interested in making sure they don't exist, in making sure they're ignored. And that's the first thing we need to prevent, so this doesn't become a dictatorship. There's a panelist from the regime, a supporter of Sanchez. Her name is Esther Palomera. She's on all the TV channels. And the other day, she said something that I want to ask you about, Zoe, and then Julio, so you can tell me if she's right. Listen.
In this life, it's much easier to be right-wing than left-wing. Right-wing people don't worry about others, or about what they see in front of them, or about guaranteeing public services. So what you have to ask yourselves is whether it's worth continuing to defend what you believe in. And I think it's worth it because our view of the world, not just of Spain, is a much fairer, much broader perspective. Theirs is exclusionary, so we can't settle for what they offer us from the other side, at least. Let's see.
And look, Zoe Valdez is getting into Zen mode to hold on until I give her the floor. Explode whenever you want, Zoe.
Well, I tweeted her and challenged her to a debate with me. I challenged her to a debate with me, starting with the fact that if public service is her, I completely pass on that public service. I'm not interested because she is ignorance personified. This woman doesn't even know what she's talking about. She doesn't even know what she is herself, which is a mediocre and terrible quality public service. That's what she is. And the other thing, well, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the right is the only side that has succeeded. Capitalism is the only system that has triumphed worldwide. The right wing is the only one that has triumphed. Everything else is loss, everything else is death, everything else is crime, everything else is exile, everything else is decay. Let him come to a public debate with me. Cool. Let's see, smart guy.
Where is Julio? Had you heard this comment?
No, fortunately not, because the same thing happens to me as to Zoe. I get this rash she gets when she hears Pedro Sanchez. It's very healthy to get rashes from listening to this nonsense. I mean, this is the typical speech of a progressive, of a leftist, who appeals to some kind of general principles, to goodwill, kindness, generosity. Well, there you have it. So what does it mean to be a socialist? A socialist is someone who has very little and is willing to give a lot, says the scoundrel who keeps Nefertiti's funerary jewels in his safe. In other words, it's a lie on top of a lie on top of a lie. Let's see, what does it really mean to be left-wing? Because we would have to define it, of course. If I put all the good on one side by definition and all the bad on the other, I've already won the debate from the start. That metaphor of left and right is ridiculous. It no longer reflects the reality of things. Here we have to talk about what crime is and what common sense is. It's that simple. Look, the left is pure crime. And that's historically true, both collectively and individually. We could spend countless programs exposing it. What is the right side of history? The right side of history is filling Asia with skulls, massacres, and mass graves like Stalin did, like Mao Zedong did, like Pol Pot did, like Ho Chi Minh did. And later, by extension, it was done in the Caribbean, with Cuba, as it was done in Nicaragua, and continues in El Salvador, and is happening in Venezuela. That is the right side of history. The right side of history is the massacres in Angola. That is the right side of history. The right side of history is absolute failure and misery for the people. It's stealing hand over fist and impoverishing societies. Is that what it means to be left-wing? Well, count me out. I'll be anything else. I'll be a liberal. I don't know if I'll be right-wing or centrist, or if I'm further to the left or to the right. I prefer to be above the filth. I mean, far away from the filth. The filth is that. That's Esther Palomera, the filth. Someone who whitewashes the filth.
You mentioned I still have a bit of flour left.
But options. But El Salvador first.
Not now, El Salvador. Underline before, not now, El Salvador. I'm talking about the change of President Farabundo Martí.
Of national liberation. Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, I'm receiving so much affection from Venezuelans thanking Bukele that you can't even imagine. I wish people would say that about my president, but I don't get a single message like that. Well, speaking of crazy, out-of-control immigration, Meneses Airport in Tenerife, look at how they're sending them to Madrid.
6 in the morning at Los Rodeos Airport in North Tenerife, hundreds of immigrants ready to board an Air Europa flight to Madrid.
And so we could see images like that, identical photos every day. And then there's a meme that looks like a meme, but it's real. Sanchez gives a speech, talks about Extremadura, and it seems like one of his scriptwriters, one of his 800 advisors is from Vox, because what he said was straight out of Vox. Listen to Sanchez, it's not manipulated.
Let's take, for example, the data from an autonomous community, such as the autonomous community of Extremadura. Extremadura has the lowest percentage of foreign residents in Spain, barely 4%. It is also the safest region in our country and the one with the cheapest housing, both for buying and renting.
Of course, 4% immigrants, the cheapest housing and the safest. Someone from Vox made this for him and it's so short that he just read it as is, right?
Look, I had already heard it, but now do you know what happens to me with this man? That little voice he puts on so people will feel sorry for him, pity him. It makes me want to do this. Look, boom. And that's why I made the gesture. And sorry to your viewers for the gesture, right? But it makes me want to slap him twice because he's a total shameless person. He's not alone, not alone. He's not the only one that has to be said.
The PP as well. You know what happens, Zoe and Albert? That in certain pathologies, there are moments of lucidity. I mean, this psychopath, well, for a moment, he emerged from the continuous episode he lives in, a moment of lucidity, and he betrayed himself. But don't worry, he goes back to his psychopathy again, by the way, with a kind of masturbatory dwarfism, because what happened the other day in Parliament can be interpreted as an act of masturbation. That thing about applauding himself.
Please, I speak differently. Your imagination is going somewhere else. Don't even think about repeating that. Let's see, please. From Venezuela, Lumila, we're listening to you.
Well, whenever I have the chance, I watch your show. You know that here in Venezuela, there are a lot of problems with electricity, and sometimes we have to go out to work too. I usually watch it a few days later. But, well, you also know that here we can't express ourselves freely. But I know that your show is a gateway for us. Honestly, ever since the United States got involved in Venezuela, the only good thing was that they took that man away. But, well, the rest, our economy is getting worse every day. This tragedy Venezuelans are suffering now. And the saddest thing is that they're getting all the support from the President of the United States, which doesn't, I'm telling you what I think is that this man really just wanted to be on this side too and take over and do the same thing everyone else was doing. And what these people in the government do is simply steal.
I don't think Trump did what he did to steal anything. Yes, I do think we need to speed things up in Cuba too. I don't know, Zoe, if you have any news, if we can move forward so that something ends already.
Well, everything has come to a halt. I imagine that what's happening in Venezuela and also the inconsistency with Iran, what's happened with Iran has really stopped everything. I don't have any firsthand news. It's very difficult, maybe. But what is true is that Marcos Rubio has given an interview saying that nothing regarding Cuba is going to be stopped and that everything being considered and planned for Cuba is going to be carried out. When? Well, that is not known yet.
Well, that's very good news to put an end to this conversation. I'm going to head to the newsroom, and you have no idea how much I love having you there from Valencia, from the Valencian community, and from Miami to better understand how the world is doing. Hugs to you both. Love you so much.
Thank you.
Same to you. Best regards.
Goodbye, friends. Editorial Susana Gastelas.
Here we are, Albert, in the Castillon Confidential newsroom, as always, receiving those messages and so many opinions from our insiders who keep joining us. That's the case with Uxia. She says it's unbelievable how this government acts with impunity and doesn't even hide it. But the most unbelievable thing is that Spanish society lets them do it without even trying to stop this huge outrage against our country, our lives, and also our children. On the other hand, Loli tells us how can we solve this? Tell me how we can stop all of this. Irene says that if they don't pay taxes, if they don't contribute, and if they don't know the political truths of the country, they shouldn't even have the right to vote. Vic says she regrets that the justice system treats all politicians and their friends with condescension in every corruption case. They should all be in pre-trial detention, including Mrs. Uno. Soraya says that voting by mail is a scam everywhere in the world. Of course, they should have already done it. They should be eliminating this possibility, but there's no way. Domingo says, and the judge is going to allow, and that's a question that isn't being asked, is going to allow Pedro Sanchez's wife to travel to Turkey. And the thing about London seems to us like it's just a provocation for the judge. On the other hand, Pilar says she was very moved watching the images of the Venezuelan firefighters saving the trapped lives. Solidarity, empathy, strength, courage, and teamwork, well done by these human beings. But on the other hand, she also tells us that the politicians and all their loyal followers are trying to rig things with bought votes. With the issue of the grandchildren law, who knows if they already have their bags of votes ready to be swapped for the real ones, which at least would go to the Atlantic, back to Hispanic America, unfortunately. And we'll leave it here for now. There are many people who write to us every day through that phone number, and you can also follow us on all our channels. Thank you very much, Albert.
Thank you very much. Regarding Begonia, Judge Peinado yesterday afternoon asked all parties to tell him what they thought, whether they would let her go to the NATO summit or not. And as expected, all parties said no, except for the prosecutor's office and the defense attorney, same as always. And now the decisions will be made, possibly even today. And let me greet Jackson, a victim of the earthquake. He sleeps on the street, he lost his home, he worked for a Spanish company, we've talked about it before, and they owe him money. Listen.
Please, please, in the name of my family, help me. I don't know who to turn to. I don't know. To get that man to pay me what he owes me. I have my 5-year-old daughter. Thank you. And my wife is out on the streets, wandering the streets because
It's the company Manteniship. We've talked about it many times, based in Oviedo. We've asked Jesus Rabadi again, and I have to say, every time we ask him for an explanation, he responds, he sends us voice messages about when he's going to pay. Listen.
Albert, honestly, it's the same situation. We're trying to gather the money however we can. It's not my fault. The fault is that nature happened, and on top of that, the ship owner still isn't paying. And I talked to the ship owner again. The ship owner says there's no money in Venezuela.
Thank you. Yes, but Jesus, I think that Jesus doesn't have bad intentions. I'm sure he'll understand that sleeping on the street is now when they need the money, even if the company has to advance it. I think it's a matter of absolute priority. You shouldn't wait for the ship owner to pay in certain situations. The ship owner in this case is PDVSA. Just imagine, with all the mess going on in Venezuela, for them to pay from here. They've paid some parts, but not this one yet. Well, if you'll allow me, we'll come back to this issue until everyone gets paid. There's a man who knows a lot about PDVSA, Julito Martinez, alleged proxy for Zapatero. He has reached or wants to reach an agreement with the prosecutor's office and tell everything. Who is he? What's going on with him? What's his situation now? What is he going to tell the judge? The journalist who broke the exclusive story will tell us in a minute. From there, a path was opened by the anti-corruption prosecutor's office so that those who confess can have advantages and avoid jail, at least as much as possible. That path may have convinced them. Julio Martinez, known as Julito, right? That's what we journalists call him, alleged frontman for Rodriguez Zapatero. He's the man who knows everything, and Zapatero has put all the responsibility on him, both on Julio and Gertrudis, as if the former president neither wrote emails nor knew anything about his business dealings. Julio Martinez changed lawyers. Now it's Maria Dolores. Marquez del Prado, it seems, has shown him the way to reach an agreement with the prosecutor's office and the Objective newspaper. He seems to have been convinced of it, meaning he would be willing to go to the prosecutor's office to reach an agreement and start confessing. Remember, he doesn't have much time left. On the 21st of this month, he has to appear before Judge Calama. The person who published that exclusive is Pelayo Barro. Welcome, Pelayo. How are you?
Hello, Albert. How are you?
Nice to talk to you. Well, tell me as much as you can. Is Julio Martinez going to confess everything he knows to the prosecutor?
Well, at first I have my doubts about the everything he knows part, and I doubt it because in the end, confessing everything means being left without, let's say, any weapons for any negotiation, right? What we do know is that he is going to cooperate, that he is going to provide information, and that this information is supposedly supposed to be relevant for the investigation for the prosecutor's office. because it is precisely the anti-corruption prosecutor's office itself that will decide whether the information he offers as cooperation is useful or not. It's the prosecutor's office that sets, let's say, the limits of what is considered cooperation. We'll have to see. Supposedly, yes. Knowing that the UDEF points to Rodriguez Zapatero as the leader of a criminal money laundering organization that used his contacts to obtain illicit benefits for his clients. Well, it's quite logical that the prosecutor's office would require information from him that would allow them to go after the alleged leader of this organization, right? What we do know is that he is willing to cooperate. At first, he went through very difficult times with his arrest. He shut down, he became very withdrawn. And last spring, things started to become a bit clearer, didn't they? Okay, they say that his family has been his main support, and that's a family with quite a few siblings. And they all have a pretty good relationship, and in the end they're the ones who have acted as his support for the difficult moments, the tough times for Julio Martinez. And well, yes, we'll have to see if this really gets confirmed and turns into an effective collaboration. We must remember there are still days left and the game isn't over yet. Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero knows how to maneuver very well. He knows how to pull strings, and well, from now until the 21st, things can still change.
Let's hope that he confesses. Julio Martinez, the alleged frontman for Zapatero, doesn't look anything like Zapatero, does he? Not even in personality. I would have been very bothered in the Plus Ultra emails. They call him the lackey, right, of Zapatero. So what is Julio Martinez like compared to his alleged boss?
Well, Julio Martinez has always avoided the spotlight. Yes, he has always been someone who liked to keep a low profile. He is someone who, let's say, conducts his business quietly. He has never wanted to show off. He doesn't show off about anything. He hasn't bought any big real estate properties. He rents an apartment in that penthouse on Diego de Leon, which is also the headquarters of Análisis Relevante. And I should mention that, by the way, we reported it. We did too. His landlords, the family that owns that property, have decided not to renew his lease, which was ending this September. So, well, he'll have to look for a new place to live, right? All of this shows us, as you said, a character very different from Zapatero, someone who, although he was very involved and deeply invested in his business dealings, we've been able to see that in all those appointment books. By the way, those notes that Julio Martinez left, all those sectors he was involved in, right? From oil to influence to lobbying, even raw materials, gold mines. In other words, he's let's say, a multifaceted businessman, right? A kind of investor and fixer. And in the end, many of those businesses, the thesis of the UDEF, which the prosecution supports, were actually businesses belonging to Zapatero, right? He is or was the man who did business on behalf of Zapatero in certain places, right? For example, here in Spain with Plus Ultra, or in Venezuela with, well, the national mining companies. Well, essentially, he's not as similar to Aldama as people think. People are thinking he's going to pull an Aldama, as it's often said, but he doesn't have that profile. Personally, he doesn't have the personality that Aldama has. He doesn't have that combative drive. We're not going to see him sitting on TV shows. But still, I do think that he's a person who appreciates like anyone else, right? It's not unusual that he values his own freedom, and that's exactly what's now being threatened.
Psicológicamente, we've heard that he's psychologically weak. Is that true?
Yes, for example, when the Senate summoned him to appear before the investigation committee, he tried to postpone it, not cancel it, just postpone it. He asked for more time to appear at another date because he claimed he had a psychological problem. What we know is that he allegedly has depression. He has what would fit a medical diagnosis of depression induced, precisely because of that downfall, because of that arrest on December 11th and everything that was coming down on him, right? As we said, he's a man who doesn't like cameras. He's a man who likes total discretion, to be completely anonymous, and apparently his whole world came crashing down on him. When, of course, when he saw his name on all the front pages, when everyone was talking about him, and he thought that maybe life wouldn't be like it had been until then, right?
Well, with that profile, Pelayo, it's even dangerous for him to go to prison. I understand that the family is trying to avoid that also for his own safety, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. Because also, from what we know, he doesn't have children. He hasn't had children, but he is very close to his siblings who do have children, who have a rather large family, let's say. And well, they are very family oriented people. And it's a very, very hard thing, to go to prison. And especially with what we're seeing, it wasn't going to be a short time.
Yes, yes, he knows everything. That's obvious. On the 21st, he has been summoned to testify. His lawyer has advised him, and we know Prosecutor Luzon, he won't settle for being told a bunch of nonsense. Is Julio Martinez going to bring evidence on the 21st before the judge? Yes.
If he doesn't want to start off on the wrong foot, let's say, in this first statement with the national court, if he doesn't want to start off on the wrong foot, with Luzon, indeed, he will have to bring them something. He will have to provide something. Just admitting things won't be enough. No, it's not enough to say I'm the lackey, like they say in the Plus Ultra chats. No, they refer to him as merely Zapatero's subordinate, like a lackey. That was precisely the first thing Julio Martinez clung to think that if he withdrew into his shell, like a turtle, and he said, I was simply following orders, don't look at me, that's not going to work. No, because the information and all the analyses and all the reports prepared by the UDEF, which have been analyzed now by that new lawyer that Marquez de Prado has, which we can talk about now because it's also very interesting what she has done. They know that both he and his lawyer, they know that the investigation is very solid and that there is strong evidence, undeniable evidence. There is evidence, regardless of whether the messages intercepted in the United States in 2021 to Rodolfo Reyes could even at some point be ruled inadmissible because due to procedural errors, let's say, in how they were obtained. There is information and there is enough evidence in the hands of the UDEF to get them in trouble. But as you said, he is the one who knows everything. He is the key to all of Zapatero's business. And therefore, the prosecutor's office is not going to settle. They are not going to settle for trivialities.
Of course, ever since you published that he is willing to spill the beans to make a deal with the prosecutor's office, the one who must be very worried is Zapatero, and I'm sure he is. Tell me about that lawyer, Maria Dolores Marquez del Prado. She was in the prosecutor's office before, right?
Marquez del Prado spent 17 years in the prosecutor's office of the National Court. In a career of nearly 30 years, about 28 years, she even reached the Supreme Court, and from there she moved on to practicing law. During those 17 years, Marquez del Prado handled and led many, many plea agreements, a lot of deals with the prosecutor's office, with cases of corruption, money laundering. She is an expert in this type of crime and knows perfectly well how they work. What about the inner workings of the prosecutor's office? She knows perfectly well how to test the anti-corruption prosecutor's office to find out what they want, what they need, and what would satisfy them. And indeed, when that change of lawyer happens due to irreconcilable differences, as her previous attorney said, obviously it's because the line of defense has become radically different from what it was before, right? Before, well, he was an expert in procedural law. And suddenly he has hired this criminal lawyer, an expert in prosecution and deals, who, by the way, we should remember, was the lawyer of Imanol Arias. Imanol Arias, the actor, was involved in that Numaria case, right? Yes. For a tax crime, he was facing 27 years. At first, the prosecution asked for 27 years in prison for him. When Marquez de Prado takes on the case, well, he redirects it. With his contacts in the prosecution, he sits Imanol Arias down with the prosecution, and the sentence is reduced to 2.5 years in prison. He doesn't even go to prison. Well, we can see a bit after having admitted to all the crimes and being willing to cooperate in everything, we can see a bit where things might be headed. I wouldn't be so optimistic as to think that on the 21st, Julio Martinez is going to go there and tell everything. But surely this will end up with Zapatero in serious legal trouble.
Sure. We will see it and read about it in The Objective with you, Pelayo Barro. Thank you very much. A big hug.
Best regards. A big hug, Alberto.
Speaking of investigations and corruption, Pilar Baselga, my friend, wants to build a monument and I'm with her. Listen, listen.
Why don't we submit a request to the Spanish city councils to build a monument to the UCO or put up a plaque or something like that for the UCO and all the news outlets come together? I can suggest ideas and we can all finance it together. What do you think?
I like the idea. I know the PP city councils will say no because it investigated Gertel and the PSOE ones will say no because it investigated Sanchez. But we have to try. If they join in, we'll do it. I like it. Pilar, Juan Miguel is asking for help. Help is being collected in many places in Spain for Venezuela. He gives us an exact address of a parish in Madrid.
It's a message I received from the parish of Santísimo Cristo de la Victoria in Madrid, where the Venezuelan community in Madrid is based. It has two entrances, one on Blasco de Garay Street and another at Fernando Católico 45. They are asking for help to unpack boxes that come in, count them, repack them according to their contents, and especially to carry boxes that may be heavy. About 100 people are helping each day, and they need more help to finish the first batch this week. People who want to lend a hand for as much time as they want and can go to the parish of the Most Holy Christ of Victory. And when they arrive, they should ask for Chris, who is the volunteer coordinator, or for Bianca, who is in charge of operations.
Please go there. We need that kind of help. Pick up, organize, and transport. You have to lift heavy things. Parish of the Most Holy Christ of Victory, 45 Fernando el Católico Street. This is in Chamberí. Go there and help. We need volunteers to organize the shipments to Venezuela. Thank you, Juan Miguel. Ana Luisa is Venezuelan and she got emotional yesterday when she listened to the great Nitu Perez Osuna.
Hello, good morning, my dear confidential team. God bless you all. Yes, this morning I listened to the program. Oh, honestly, I started crying when I heard Nitu say, yes, give me the phone. I've known Nitu for years, from when I lived back in Venezuela. I used to see her on television. She's a fabulous, extraordinary journalist. It's terrible what's happening over there, not only with the narco dictatorship, but now with this too. So thank you. Thank you, yes. Hugs and blessings.
A kiss, dear. To you and the little dog. Well, Ana Luisa is a teacher and she's offering to organize and help those children who are alone after the earthquake. I gave your phone number and information to my dear friend Nitu, and if anything can be done, she'll take care of it. I have no doubt. Nitu is, besides being a good journalist, a good and even better person. And she will collaborate. She has been doing it here for a long time, but now she will collaborate more regularly in this space, and I am very happy that it is so. Well, the first one who sent me this video was Carlos Marcos. Then many of you have sent it to me as well. It's a new bus line that has been launched in Madrid to transport people. That's what a city bus is for, right?
The Ministry of Transport has promoted the creation of a new direct bus line that will connect the PSOE headquarters on Ferraz Street with the Soto del Real prison. Soon this line will add a new stop in Moncloa. Ministry of Transport and Sustainable Mobility, Miss Government of Spain.
It's good or it's not good. I hope that very soon there will be that new stop in Moncloa because the destination is the same at Soto del Real prison. There are great people who do these things. Well, and more, speaking of great people, Los Meconios are great, they're discreet, and they're good friends. New version of the Macarena by Los Meconios. Go to their social media, look for them on their channels, and follow them.
Give your body socialist joy, because your body will be enjoying government handouts. Live off the system and brag about it every day.
I'm a socialist. Yeah, boy. Well, they're really great. A hug, friends. Now pay attention because Sanchez, guess what? He used Extremadura as an example and said that we've heard it before. There's no immigration there, and coincidentally, there's no crime. And housing is cheap. He didn't realize he forgot to say national priority, right? That he was reading Vox's talking points. Freud Lannister has illustrated this with images and cartoons.
And let's take, for example, the data from an autonomous community like the autonomous community of Extremadura, which has the lowest percentage of foreign population in Spain. Extremadura has barely 4%. It is also the safest region in our country and the one with the cheapest housing, both for buying and renting. What solution will we propose within Spain's Socialist Party? Well, we are going to move the entire foreign population to Extremadura so that crime and housing prices increase there just as much as in Barcelona. We can't allow those fascists in Extremadura to live with such selfishness and peace just because the train doesn't reach them. We socialists are completely focused on screwing everyone equally. Since people will probably resist these measures, tomorrow the Council of Ministers will approve a royal decree to ban the racist act of having an opinion contrary to mine. I'll also ban Judge Peinado while I'm at it, and to hell with him.
Please, how unpleasant. Well, it's really good. The argument is really good. It's possible we might actually see this happen. You and I will probably be in prison by then, but we'll see it anyway. Well, and to wrap up a bit, by the way, thanks to Angel Inez for sending me that video. And to finish, our opinion leader in Tenerife, Abraham Gomez, our favorite insider from the Canary Islands. Attention, the reflection is internal. Listen.
Pedri, I am your guardian angel from the Civil Guard. I'm exhausted. I'm here in paradise, but I'm already... Because yes, you're in a tax haven, but I'm here in a country. I have to protect you and your 2,500 advisors, which is a lot of people lying at the same time. I have no creativity. I'm exhausted, you know? But at the same time with Pungidi, because I have to help you, I don't know if I should quit. It makes me really sad. I see that the PSOE, and they're right, because the other day the spokesperson came out and she said something. She said that this term under the Socialist Workers' Party is still worth it. And I say, yes, I agree that it's worth it. I don't know how many years they could get, maybe 200, 300, but a solid sentence would be good, so I agree with her, you know? I see your number two, the poor guy. He's 24 years old. That's a lot of candles to blow out, Pedro Pedri, and it really pains me. He's always taking in other people. He doesn't like it for himself, but he likes taking others in, and he filed an amparo appeal. She said that this time not her. That he should appeal on his own because it can't go on like this, and of course the poor guy he's hurt, you know? I ran to the hardware store we have here in Paradise, to buy solvent, to see if you can dissolve parliament because you don't know that those things dissolve. But not even that, not even with solvent. So I see you looking so downcast. You can work with the authorities. I saw this story the other day. It's positive. Because instead of getting 250,000 years in prison, you get 200 years straight. That's it, without the extra 1,000. So you have time to go to Lanzarote just like you like, grab a piece of the sea that you like to think is yours, even though it belongs to everyone, but you like to think it's just yours, and swim there and drown in happiness. It's something we wish for, but first we have to solve a few little problems it has, and that's it, really. Because as an angel of the Civil Guard, I've been investigating psychologically what could happen to you, what could happen with so many noble and honest people. Because I'm telling you, there are just 40 million Spaniards saying bad things about you, and that's a stone in your path, but you have to keep fighting. And from here in Paradise, the only thing I've thought is that things are simple in nature. And you and your ministers and everyone, when you're there in Faraz, all together and talking, I think they're simple people, and deep down, the only thing they can't be. I ask in a polite way, as Antonio Gala would say, that the only thing wrong with you is that you're simply idiots.
We are confidential. You are confidential.
Let's see who answers. You answer. Do it. Friends, tomorrow we'll continue in the trenches, and I'll be waiting for you. We need you. Thank you for being there, and thank you for the donations that come at the end of the month, because without them, we couldn't go on. Isabel de Depu, who says the trenches, thank you. Maria Josemi Ramon RG, R. Thank you, Ramon. Jose Ignacio de Burgon Trench, thank you. Like every month, there you are. Annabel Fernandez, thank you for informing. A huge kiss. Annabel. Consuelo Orts, thank you very much. And Teresa Nieto, thank you because you make this machine keep going. We'll continue tomorrow. A hug.
You know it, and I know it. Thank you. We are confidential, you are confidential, I am confidential, all confidential, but shh, only for open minds and for awakened people. Wake up. From the trench, the bullets whistle, and there's no way to get out there. Here, freedom has wings of wax. Albert Castillon, Susanna Gash. Your girl is myself, and so on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.